racial epithets.
But as long as we're going to use words to describe things, how can we help but use maps to describe the territory?
Well, we got to use maps. Korzybski's point is we got to realize the map is not the territory. And the second point is the map does not show all the territory. And my favorite illustration of that is a map of Dublin, Ireland, that showed all the territory. It would have to be at least 2,000 years old, because we know there were people settled around there at least 2,000 years ago. It would have to be 2,000 years old, perpetually changing over the 2,000 years, and including God knows how many million human beings, how many 100 million rats and mice, how many billions of bacteria, how many deer, bear, and other critters that have been driven out by now, all of them moving for 2,000 years. That would be a complete map. And it would be no use whatsoever, because the purpose of a map is to simplify it and help you understand. When you include everything you haven't simplified, you don't understand any better. All you got is a vast whirling confusion. So the map does not show all the territory, which means no model covers the whole universe. No theory explains everything. And the third, which is the most subtle, is you can make a map of the map and a map of the map of the map, and so on to infinity, which means that as information accumulates, every map can be revised, and you can make a map of the map. As, for example, chemistry and physics were two different sciences up until physical chemistry began to appear. Neurology and psychology are more and more being replaced by neuropsychology or psychoneurology. Immunology has blended with two other sciences, and now you see there's actually a journal, I think, called the Journal of Psychoneuroimmunology, which is brain, nervous system, immunological system interactions, which is, I think, where you find the whole explanation of faith healing, Christian Science, spontaneous remission, and other medical oddities of that sort, where what people think seems to have an effect on how fast they recover or how well they recover from an illness. And now we've got sciences like ethnomethodology, which is sort of the social science that studies other social sciences. That's definitely a map of the map. And in a sense, Marxism is a map of all previous economics. Marxism analyzes how all previous systems of economics rationalize the interests of some class or other. And Marxism is more true than the others, according to the Marxists, because it rationalizes the class interest of the class that is going to take over the whole world eventually, namely the suffering and crucified workers. It's a variation on the basic Christian myth put into sociological jargon. Freudianism is a map of all previous maps, in the sense you can use Freud to analyze anybody's maps and see what neurotic functions they are serving, what self-defensive. For instance, a Freudian analysis of Marxism would say that Marx must have had a lot of conflicts with his father, which he projected onto the capitalist as a father figure, and the whole Marxist movement is an Oedipal rebellion of sons against fathers, which oddly enough was suggested by Guillaume Battista Vico in 1735, long before Freud or Marx. Vico said all revolutions are sons against fathers. That's in his book, The New Science, which is the basic structure that Joyce adopted in Finnegan's Wake.
Isn't Vico one of the background characters for Finnegan's Wake?
Yeah, he plays as an important role in Finnegan's Wake as Homer does in Ulysses. Vico is sometimes called a philosopher, but I have seen him referred to as the father of scientific sociology. He thought he was a scientist. His book is called The New Science, and it's an attempt to analyze history in a way that makes sense out of it. He was one of the first to realize the importance of language in creating perception. He came 200 years before Korzybski or Benjamin Lee Whorf or Edward Sapir. By the way, the theory that language influences perception is nowadays generally called the Korzybski-Whorf-Sapir hypothesis, because all three of them published it at approximately the same time. I tend to quote Korzybski more often than Whorf or Sapir, because Korzybski, I think, made a more totally revolutionary system out of that simple basic discovery. And he offered a whole bunch of clues as to how you could reform your language to avoid most of the errors that seem to be built into the Indo-European subject-predicate language structure.
So he not only pointed out a problem, but a solution.
He sees a problem and a bunch of tools to help you work toward a solution.
What would some of those be?
Well, I've been doing it throughout all these programs, and nobody can see it because these are audios. It's the gesture of waving two fingers in the air. It's putting quotes around a word. That is to remind yourself and remind the people you're talking to that that word has multiple meanings, and there's no general agreement. It hasn't been scientifically and operationally defined, so we may be blundering into metaphysics without even knowing that we're doing so. He put those quotes around all sorts of words, like mind, and whenever he had to refer to space, he'd put quotes around it. He wouldn't put quotes around space-time because he thought that had been scientifically defined. But if he had to refer to space alone, he'd put quotes around it. And God, he not only put quotes around it, but when he was talking, he spoke the letters out loud, quote, G-O-D, unquote. He thought that was such a dangerous and unscientific term that you had to protect yourself doubly against falling into traps when you started using it. Another of Korzybski's devices is dating. Like, John is grouchy, which is a sentence you might hear any day, anywhere. It carries over the medieval scholastic version of Aristotelianism implicitly, which assumes that John has some kind of demon or essence or metaphysical something inside him called grouchiness. A more operational statement, which Korzybski would prefer, were John seemed grouchy at the office this morning. Now, if you believe John is grouchy is a sensible sentence, and you meet John at the beach, he's got a beer can in his hand and his arm around a beautiful girl, and he's laughing his head off, then you got to conclude John has multiple personality disorder. John is grouchy and John is cheerful. Oh, he's bipolar personality. But if you realize the organism and the environment principle, John may very well be grouchy in the office because it's a miserable place to work. And John may be basically a cheerful person when he's not stuck in the office.
Isn't that the kind of ambiguity that we just learn to deal with?
Well, the thing is, Korzybski's tactics are to help you deal with it and be on guard against these kind of overstatements. As a fascinating example, fascinating to me anyway, the hero of Joyce's Ulysses, Leopold Bloom. Critics refer to Bloom as a Jew from the 1920s up until the 1970s when somebody published an essay in the James Joyce Review called, "Is Leopold Bloom a Jew?" It depends on how you define Jew. According to the rabbinical definition, a Jew is the son of a Jewish mother. Bloom is not Jewish by that definition. He's the son of a Protestant mother. According to the Nazi definition, a Jew is anybody with a known Jewish ancestor. Bloom is a Jew by that definition because his father was Jewish. A third definition is a Jew is somebody who practices the Jewish religion. By that definition, almost every Jew I know is not a Jew. I don't know a single Jew who practices the religion. And Leopold Bloom doesn't practice the religion either, so he's not a Jew by that definition. Fourth definition is somebody who, even though he doesn't practice the religion and doesn't have a Jewish mother, regards himself as Jewish because of ethnic or cultural solidarity. And then there's a fifth category, which is somebody who doesn't generally think of himself as Jewish, but suddenly finds himself identified that way, or identifying himself that way, like Dreyfus perhaps when he denounced some of Israel's foreign policies.